All right. Good morning, everyone. Glad to see you or not see you in the case if you're eating. I'm Amy Putzer with the Oshkosh Area Community Foundation, and it's wonderful to have you with us for part two of our AI Tools and Action series. This one focusing on smarter grant writing with AI. Before we begin, I would just like to recognize our co-sponsors that help make this learning series possible. The Association for Fundraising Professionals of Northeast Wisconsin chapter, and Denise Hushauer is on the call. So shout out to you, Denise. The United Way, the Oshkosh Area United Way, and the Nonprofit Leadership Initiative. So we're grateful to have these partners help us bring to you high quality professional development opportunities. Um, in part one of this series, we did explore how to technically set up AI tools like ChatGPT and Google Notebook LM. Today, we'll see how ChatGPT, we're not actually going to do a demonstration with Notebook LM, but we are going to focus on ChatGPT today to walk through some real world examples of how AI can streamline the grant writing process as well as the reporting process. Our presenter is Noelle Fenwick, Associate Director at Reach Counseling. She's uh, been successful in securing millions of dollars in local, state, and federal and foundation funding. She now uses AI in her daily workflows to make writing more efficient, reports clearer, and deadlines less stressful. Don't we all want some of that? Um, we will save time at the end for questions. So feel free to drop them in the chat as we go. And with that, please join me in welcoming Noelle.
Hey, good morning, everyone. And again, welcome to part two, integrating AI tools into the grant writing process. As Amy shared, my name is Noelle Fenwick, and I am with Reach Counseling. I'm really excited to share how we work with AI to make grant writing and reporting more efficient, thoughtful, and manageable. So I wanted to share a little bit of our roadmap today. I'll do a very quick recap of part one and what we covered there. And then before we dive into workflows and examples, I do want to take a brief moment to talk about the ethics and the limits of using AI, what we know, what we don't, and how to use that responsibly. From there, we'll walk through real examples of how AI can speed up drafting, align tone, and help translate data into some meaningful narrative reports. And then we'll talk about how we use it at Reach and talk about prompting in practice and some examples of walking through using ChatGPT for the grant writing and reporting process. And then finally, again, opening that up to ask questions, talk about prompts and applying these tools in your own grant work. So in part one, Jay talked about how to set up custom ChatGPT or Google Notebook LM using your reference materials and getting everything set up, as well as how to choose which tool is which tool is the right tool for the right task. And so applying what was learned in part one, I did want to take a peek into our grant writer assistant and talk a little bit about the instructions we have set up in here to set us up for success. So some things that this grant writer assistant will and will not do. It will understand the audience, be clear and concise, follow grant guidelines or any other guidelines that we provide it. It will not be too ambiguous or make unsupported claims or overcomplicate the proposal. And then finally, there are some words and phrases or formatting requests that I make of our ChatGPT to not do, either because in our anti-violence work at Reach, we're our sexual assault service provider, there's certain words that we try to steer away from, or because they're just overused in ChatGPT language. For example, beacon, beacon of hope, beacon of light. It's very common for whatever reason that has been ChatGPT's go-to when writing about nonprofits. And so it's a very common tell that someone may be using ChatGPT and may not be editing as thoughtfully. So we try to avoid the use or the overuse of the word beacon, for example. And then I did just want to briefly touch on the knowledge bank that we give our ChatGPT grant writer assistant in writing these applications. So we have a couple key project narratives or applications that we've submitted, and I made sure that these applications across the three of them cover all four of our programs. So when we're uploading knowledge, we want to make sure that we're touching on everything that our nonprofit does so that it has that full picture. Also uploaded is our vision, our mission, our values, as well as some local data and key findings, statistics, things that I really wanted to keep center of mind. Instead of scouring the whole web, I made it a little bit more refined on the data that I would like it to use. So again, this is just a little bit of that background, applying part one, so that we can effectively do everything we're going to learn today in part two. So before we move forward, I do want to acknowledge something really important, and that is that AI is powerful, but it's not neutral. These data sets are trained on massive scraped data sets, often without consent, because it is anything that's open access on the internet. It can also reflect and perpetuate existing social biases. So it's not designed for nonprofits in mind. So we really have to adapt thoughtfully and think really critically when we're using ChatGPT and when we're using those outputs. There's also an environmental cost to ChatGPT. So it does require huge data centers that use massive amounts of water and energy, and these are often located in communities already facing infrastructure and environmental injustice. So with all of that in mind, I think it's important for every user to find their own ethical boundary. For me, I don't use it for every email and task. I really only hone in on the places where it cuts hours of work, so down to something manageable. So things like really large grants, reporting, or narrative drafts. I also stay really transparent with my team on when I'm using it, and I'm always editing those outputs to keep in mind of those existing social biases. So your line might look different. I just encourage everyone to find their own individual ethical line, and that you know where that is. So looking into how AI can help write faster, but without compromising your organization's voice or values. So it is a master of generating quick drafts so that you're not just working on a blank page, watching the cursor blink. It's also really great on saving time on routine tasks like summaries, need statements, or other really repetitive tasks that we have when writing. But the key here, and what will be the main focus of today, is starting with really strong prompts. Those are super useful to make sure that the results reflect our mission and our tone. And so again, it's not about letting AI completely take control and write the whole grant. You are still the writer. AI just helps you start from something, again, better than a blank page, and helps you refine that message a lot quicker than doing it independently. So here's what that looks like in practice. On the left, you'll see vague prompts, things like write a grant for trauma services or explain what we do at our nonprofit. These often will lead to generic or flat outputs. On the right are prompts that actively reflect our organization's voice and our needs. So you'll see here, especially like that bottom one, a lot of you might look familiar if you recently submitted for your United Way Fox Cities letter of intent. So I was really clear to say, here's who we're writing to. Here's our relationship with that funder. So they funded all four of our programs in previous years. And then here's just the first question. I don't typically dump the whole application in. I go a question at a time. And I'm providing any other guidelines that I know of. So is there a character count or a word count? Are there attachments that I can provide that also tell you what those funding priorities are? Because in question one, it says, how does it align with the funding priorities? Well, if you're not giving it that information of what those are, it's going to guess and fill in the blank, and we don't want it to guess. As Jay had mentioned in part one, ChatGPT is like the intern. It's really good when you give it specific instructions. So those better inputs will really make better outputs. And you'll see that demonstrated in a little bit later too. So next, I do want to talk about tone. We all know every funder is different and unique. Some want more community stories, others are really metric and data driven, and others are really focused on systems change or the long-term impact of the programming of a nonprofit. So AI can help us adjust tone so that we don't have to continually rewrite every section from from scratch to match their priorities. So saving a lot of time and rewriting those sections. But again, we are still in control. They can help us explore, or AI can help us explore voice and framing, but our values and intent still need to remain central to the narrative and make that clear to our grant writer assistants. Again, that prompting will really guide that output. So clear instructions about audience and purpose will make it easier to make writing that fits each funder's style. So here is another side-by-side. Weak prompts like make this more emotional often lead to overdone or savior-centered language. But when you're more specific in your ask and where you're going, the tool has something to work with and it becomes a partner in editing, not a ghostwriter. So for example, again, the left-hand side, things like just change the tone. We'll change it how. We have to be a little bit more specific. So on the right-hand side, we have some more specific examples of stronger prompts. This last one is actually one of my favorite grants to write for every year. If any of you have experience applying for girl-powered giving within the Women's Fund for the Fox Valley region, it is not your typical grant committee, and the decision makers are actually a group of girls aged 12 to 15. So with that, we need to rethink a lot of how we're talking about our programs to make sure that it resonates with that demographic. It's understandable and it actually meets them where they are. And so giving that context, and again, providing any character counts, word counts, funding priorities documents, all of that so that we get a really good start. And then from there, we can further refine. Again, that intern needs all the instructions to be able to provide a good, solid output. And then finally, AI is really great at turning data into meaningful reporting because we know that funders do expect more than just numbers and straight outcome data. They want to understand the story behind the results and what those results mean in terms of the impact your nonprofit is making in the community. So AI can really help translate those metrics in ways that's readable, that really highlights the impact and progress that your nonprofit is making. Can also save time on repetitive reporting. I know we've all had grants where one program is being funded by 4 different funders, for example, and each one, their reporting looks a little different. And we don't just want to copy and paste. We want it to feel meaningful for that grantor that we took the time. But we also don't want to be rewriting from scratch for every single report. And so AI is a really great way to help us save time on that repetitive reporting and help us tailor those paragraphs for each report pretty quickly. And again, these prompts really want to be structured so that they ensure the narrative reflects our values and connects the numbers to our broader goals, either of our program or of that grant. And a really great reminder always that strengthening this will really strengthen grant renewal language. So strong data storytelling can support continued funding by showing both effectiveness and need in a really concise and compelling way. So here is one more prompt comparison. Weak prompts like make this sound better just really don't work. They tend to produce vague or fluffy content. I will say ChatGPT's default setting is often fluff. It can add a lot of adjectives. And so we really want to be clear and concise on what we're looking for from our content. So those stronger prompts are giving specifics, the funder focus, the reporting period, or the outcomes that we need to emphasize. So again, this isn't hands-off. It's really collaborative writing that starts with a really clear prompt. So on the right-hand side, I have a few examples of some stronger prompts. This last one is one we just used in the last few weeks. We had a VOCA final report, so I wanted to be really clear on who's the grantor, VOCA, what programs do they support, our therapy and advocacy services, and then again went question by question. Talked about what the question was, if they have any word counts, this funder does not, so I didn't have to include that information. And then I added in a rough draft of notes that I received from our team leads, or the lead of each of our 4 program areas. And so what I do is send a request about a couple days before it's due, so I have some time to revise of just, please give me your raw information, what's going well, what's not going well, all these final report questions, and then working with ChatGPT to work with that raw information and make it something really meaningful and impactful. So these next couple sets of slides will go from beyond just me talking about it and really showing what this looks like in ChatGPT so we can see it in action. So our first example here ties back to our very first week prompting that we had talked about. So write a grant summary for trauma services. And it's not terrible. It's not a terrible output. It does talk about some of our services like individual counseling, group therapy, uses some of our keywords that are in our knowledge bank like trauma-informed care, but it's also missing critical information because I didn't tell it that it needed to give it. So like it didn't use our name, for example. It doesn't talk about that we serve sexual assault survivors. It just talks about trauma really broadly because I didn't ask for it to do so. It also doesn't share what age demographic we work with, what geographic demographic we work with. And so it needs all of the right information to give you an output that you're seeking. So here is an example of giving a lot more context. So I talked about the word count, the amount we're applying for, is it restricted or not? And then I'll also include, for example, say I met with this funder ahead of time, and we talked a lot about the funding cuts our organization is serving. And they also had mentioned in our meeting that they're really passionate about reach because we serve across the lifespan. So these are all things I want to include in my grant summary. But again, ChatGPT won't know that unless I tell it. So after being a little bit more specific, we get a much more valuable output that emphasizes our service area, how much we're requesting, what we do, who we serve, things like that. So then moving on to an example of shifting tone. So again, a weaker prompt, make this more emotional. I took that same grant summary that we just got from example 1 to see what it would do when I just asked, make this more emotional for me. And so its output is a little much. It uses a lot of adjectives. Reach counseling is a vital force in the fight against the devastating effects of sexual violence. Our team's confronting unimaginable pain. It's a lot. It's not necessarily terrible, but it is a little bit more fluffy than our writing style typically is. But ChatGPT leans towards fluff. So if you give it an inch, it will definitely take a mile and really get fluffy. You'll also notice it used the word beacon. Even though I said not to, sometimes those things sneak in, and which is why it's always important to proof your outputs. And beacon is one of its favorite fluff words. So just some things to keep in mind. So then a better example of prompting to revise tone. This time I asked it, really revise the tone because what I'm going for is I really want to articulate our program's impact on the community and what that means. And then pasted in that same grant request summary that we had landed on in example 1. And so with that, this grant summary is a little bit more specific towards what I was going for. It talks a lot about how we served hundreds of community members, helping people find safe, affordable services. So again, it's getting a little bit closer to what I'm going for. However, let's say I read that and I was like, oh, you know what? I think something else will sound a little bit better. Then we can go back and forth and have a conversation and really tweak to what we're going for. So for example, for this demo's sake, I put in, this isn't exactly what I'm going for. I really want to drive home Reach's impact on the individual through therapy and advocacy, and then through the community, through prevention education and offender treatment, which are our 4 core services in total. And so once I clarified, it thanked me. It is very much like a conversation, and then had a refined version of this output. And so here you'll see it really did a good job of emphasizing what I asked it to. It talks about the individual therapy and advocacy to help people process trauma and regain safety. And then at the same time, addressing the root causes of violence through prevention ed and offender services, working with people who have caused harm, and how that dual approach really creates that meaningful change in our community. So again, what you put in is what you get out. And maybe as you're working through this too, you have more ideas that come through for how you want to tailor that message. So again, a collaborator, but not necessarily going to take over the task entirely, but still save you a ton of time. And so our last example here, working through actually in ChatGPT is some grant reporting. So I started with a weaker prompt. I just dumped some data into some of our metric data from last year and asked it to turn it into a paragraph. And it actually didn't do too terrible. It does also, it's working, of course, off of our knowledge, its instructions that I put in on the back end. So with that in mind, also knowing the more that you work with your ChatGPT, the better it gets at writing for your program. So some of this was hard to kind of, word this nicely to get it back to how it will behave when you first start working with ChatGPT. So again, it's not terrible, but it could be more specific. For example, if there's other metrics in this grant that I haven't shared with them, maybe this grantor was really passionate about other services as well, in addition to counseling, and funded that. We want to make sure that we're answering all of our funders' questions. So here's an example of a better prompt. Using this 2024 data, write a short report paragraph for a grant renewal. For this funder, it's really important that we emphasize how our trauma-informed services improve mental health for underserved communities. And so with that in mind, it does a better job of emphasizing the true impact of our numbers. So not just that, of course, we reduced, trauma symptoms and reported healthier coping strategies, but connecting it. So that demonstrates measurable improvement in emotional well-being. And adding in that prevention education number that we had given previously. And so talking about how we're reaching folks about boundaries, consent, and support resources, and how these outcomes really reflect our mission services and what we're working to do in serving underserved communities, for example. But again, if this isn't quite right, if there's more things we need to add, we can go back and forth on this chat thread to further refine. So sorry, I had had the output there a little bit bigger. But so to further refine this, for example, whoops, I think I'm covering, that's what I'm doing. Your guys' little boxes are covering my output up here. Let me move this. Oh, so let me go back a little bit too. So as I was mentioning, sometimes, you can put in your knowledge base, certain things like not using M dashes, for example. That doesn't mean it's always going to happen. So it's something you still want to prove for. So for example, this output, it does still have an M dash in there. So I want to, reply, let them know that we don't want that in our responses. And then, for example, let's say, oh my gosh, I forgot, this funder also funds our advocacy program. We want to make sure that's included in this report narrative for a grant renewal. So I prompted it to add those in and take out the M dash. And so it gave me some great information. This likely wouldn't be its final results. I would want to, more balance each of our programs so they're mentioned more equally throughout this report narrative and give some specific metrics for advocacy. But you notice I didn't give it, so it can't report it. Again, it's a give and take, and what you give is what you get back. Okay. So I have a couple of things to end on as a final reflection. AI is not a tool. It is AI is a tool. It is not a replacement. It is useful when it saves time and adds value, but it's only effective when we use it with intention and clarity. So we don't want it to replace our judgment or our personal voice. And we want to give it that clarity, that context and direction for the more meaningful and accurate outputs. We also want to make sure that we're keeping that mission and value at the center of these inputs and outputs, so making sure that every prompt, paragraph, and report still reflect our organization's purpose and approach to care. It's also important to know the limits. It can't do everything. It certainly can't replace community relationships, cultural understanding, or the nuances of trauma-informed storytelling, for example. So that's the expertise that we need to bring to the table in doing this collaborative process with ChatGPT. And again, ethics should guide that use. So how you use AI matters. Being mindful of privacy, environmental impact, and labor practices behind the technology is important as we use this tool. So I want to say thank you for walking through this with me. I really hope you feel more confident and curious, not overwhelmed about where AI might fit into your work. I'm happy to answer questions, and we actually had 3 that were submitted ahead of time. So if it's okay, Amy, I will answer those 3, and then we can see if there's any other questions that folks have today. The first one was, what liabilities or legal implications should we be aware of when using AI to draft content? Which is a really great and important question to ask. Right now, there is no single law governing AI use in grant writing, but there are still legal and ethical risks to keep in mind. First, as we talked about in part 1, anything you input into a public AI model like ChatGPT should not include anything sensitive, confidential, or personally identifying information. Even if it feels private, it's not fully secure. I would also be cautious about copyright. So when you're asking AI to write content, I avoid copying in large chunks of text. And instead, I'm using sources that I already own, most oftentimes, like repurposing past grant language, organizational metrics, things like that. And I'm always fact checking the output. Lastly, if you're working under a government or a foundation contract, I always recommend double checking their guidelines. Some might expect original authorship. And while using AI as a tool is fine in most cases, transparency is always the safest. The second question we got ahead of time, what do we know about how grantors perceive the use of AI? So again, right now, most funders don't have formal policies about AI use in proposals, but I think perception really depends on how it's used. So if your writing comes across as generic, robotic, or completely disregards that funder's priorities, they'll definitely notice and it won't reflect well on your organization. However, if it's used well as a drafting tool, most reviewers won't know. And in all the conversations I've had with funders, they're honestly excited that a smaller nonprofit is able to write more in less time. But if you're ever unsure, you can always ask directly. I've also heard from some reviewers that they expect folks to use tools like these, especially for really time-consuming sections like reporting or summaries. So it's all about how it's responsibly used. Amy, I don't want to put you on the spot, but I know as a funder on this call, if you wanted to weigh in on that question too, I wanted to give you space.
Yeah, that question came up a couple times in the roundtable discussions last week, and I really think it depends on the funder. I mean, obviously, we're sponsoring, webinars on how to use AI, so we're fine with it. I think it's just one more tool that you can use in your toolbox. We all multitask, have too much on our plates, so um, work smart, not hard. So personally, I can say the Oshkosh Area Community Foundation, it's fine by us, but I can't speak for other funders because, like you said, this is evolving and I think many are still trying to figure out how they feel about it. So asking them directly, I think was great advice.
So, and then we just had one more question that was submitted ahead of time. Can AI help us identify new funders or funding opportunities that match our mission? So AI can help with that, but with some limitations. Tools like ChatGPT won't give you real-time access to foundation databases or grant portals because they're not really designed to be search engines. But that said, you can use AI to narrow your focus. So for example, you can ask it to give you some resources on what portal should you be using to find funding opportunities that relate to your mission, or drafting a letter of inquiry tailored to a certain mission. But if you're looking for new funders, I really recommend using the platforms out there like Foundation Directory or connecting with local community foundations, as they are a wealth of knowledge of funding in the communities that we serve. So again, ChatGPT is a support tool, but not often used as a discovery tool. So I wanted to make that distinction. And so those are the 3 questions that were submitted ahead of time. And then before we wrap, I just want to quickly share something that we're really excited about Reach. I would be remiss if I didn't mention it. We are in the midst of launching Reach Forward, which is a new branch of our work that allows us to partner one-on-one with other organizations. So through Reach Forward, we're offering hands-on support with things like this, like AI integration and grant writing, but also things like strategic planning, fundraising, and equity-driven facilitation. So it's really designed to meet organizations where they are and walk with them through really complex work, whether that's getting a grant across the finish line or reimagining how you tell your story. So if that's something your team could use support with, I would love to talk more after today. But again, thank you so much for coming today. I'm happy to answer questions, walk through other examples, or talk through any specific use cases with ChatGPT.
So Noelle, we do have a couple questions that were chatted in. One from Kathy. I don't know, do you use Google Notebook LM at
You know,
all? She was asking whether you had a preference between ChatGPT or Google Notebook LM.
yeah, that's a really great question. So I am just getting started on my Google Notebook LM journey. Thanks to Jay. Actually, we were talking back and forth about the different tools that we use. It sounds like it's a really great tool for finding new data points and really finding how to make a really solid need statement through those data points. But as Jay had mentioned, and what I'm finding in very rudimentary, starting points there is that it can be a little clunky on the outputs in terms of really drafting solid narrative sections. And so I'm still relying on ChatGPT for those.
And then another question from Hillary. Have you or you and the team at Reach thought about the ways that AI captures the information that you're sharing with ChatGPT?
Yeah, that's a really great point that talks a lot about that confidentiality and privacy of information. So again, we're not sharing anything that is confidential or personally identifying. So we'll put in the same metrics that we would share on Facebook or on our website of, this is how many people have improved. Or if we have consent to share a quote on our Facebook, maybe that's a quote we give to ChatGPT to incorporate in a grant narrative. So we are really mindful to make sure that we're not putting anything confidential or personally identifying or private into the chatbot.
Well, Noelle, you were super quick, so I'm just gonna shoot from the hip. And I think I've shared with some of you, I've been attending my own webinars and trying to figure this out. And I want to show you one thing that I think is relevant to kind of what we're talking about today, just to give you another idea of what you might think about doing. So I'm going to pull it up real time, so hopefully I won't regret this. All right. Oops, I'm not seeing it. Let me start again. Let me get it up. Okay, so you are live in an exercise that I did in a webinar. I wanted to show you the prompt where it says, analyze my writing style and produce a set of custom writing instructions / prompts so chats sound like me. This I found fascinating. I just grabbed the, quick document and plugged it in. But what's interesting is it analyzed a lot more than I expected to. Sentence structure, language patterns, signature phrases, all of that. But then what was even cooler is you can tweak it, but then if you tell it to remember your writing style profile for future chats, it will save it to your memory. One thing that I don't know that we covered in either one of the sessions, but within the settings, um, the personalization. So this memory area can be your friend or be your enemy. So I don't even know what's in here. Like I said, I'm taking a chance. So here you can see that it did record this and it made some other notes. So you might just out of curiosity go into your personalization settings in your memories just to go through and clean up and see what it thinks it knows about you, whether that's accurate or not. I actually saw some things I'm like, delete, delete, delete. Like, okay, why did you pick that out of all the things that you could? So I think that that was another useful exercise in my journey to get that tone. So it sounds like you, it sounds like your organization. You can take those documents that are the reference materials and it just one more level of customization. Denise asked the question, is this only for free version or does it need to be paid? I believe it's free and paid. You just need to have the account. We've got a little extra time, so again, I'm one that's kind of informal, shoot from the hip. I'm going to keep recording, but is anybody else that's on the call? I'm guessing we're all on this journey together. I don't want to put you on the spot, but if you've learned a tip or a trick that you'd like to share with the group to kind of help all of us move forward, I'll just open the space for you to do that. Kathy asks, Noelle, you referred to the custom assistant in the beginning. Is that the free or the paid version?
Great question. So that is the paid version. However, what's really great too, that I think we talked a little bit about in part one. So the paid version, yes, it's for one individual account, but that means that person could create a custom chat GPT for your organization and then share out that link. And then anyone with a free account can use that link. So that's what we do. I have the paid version, but then I'm also sharing, you can make as many custom ones with that as well. So I have a grant writer assistant, I have a PR writer assistant for things like press releases. And so both of those have been shared out with anyone who needs them on our team, and they can use that with a free version. Another workaround I'll share just really quickly is if you have the free version, you're not looking to invest in the paid version. It is pretty small. I think it's about $20 a month, but if you're not there yet, that's okay. You can prompt at the beginning of a conversation to narrow in that focus. So you can give those instructions as your first prompt, like, hey, we're going to be working on a grant. Here's your instructions to keep in mind this whole chat thread, and it will do that. So similar things, if we're writing outside of grant writing, for example, say we're fundraising and we're writing, silent auction descriptions and writing starting bids, you can prompt ChatGPT to focus in on that information that it has from its sources. So for example, saying, hey, what's some good things to keep in mind when writing silent auction items, descriptions, and starting bids? It will generate a bunch of information for you and then say, okay, please keep that in mind and let's get going with that task. So that's another way to kind of prompt it and get it prepared for or primed for what you're planning to do. See Jessica's chat too. Two paid versions, $20 a month and $25 a month. Oh.
So the $20 a month is the nonprofit rate. You do have to sign up for it through a different channel. Has anybody actually gone through that channel and maybe can chat in a link of how to get at that $20 rate? Because it's not extremely clear. You can't do it just through the normal interface. You do have to go through an additional process, and I bet Noelle is chatting it in right now just to ask.
Yeah,
Because
I'm
it
looking
does,
for it. It was so long ago that I can't, but
yeah.
I'm looking for it.
So while she's looking, are there any other questions or tips or tricks that people would like to share? Okay. Uh, maybe if we find it, I will follow up with an email that includes the recording of this session, the slide deck, all of that. I can include the link if we can find it and how you can get at that nonprofit version. Jay added in a comment. I looked recently a bit into the Teams version, but ultimately we do the same as Noelle said with one person creating the assistant. Yes, because the Teams version would be another option. All right, so not seeing any other questions, I'm just gonna thank you, Noelle, for sharing the great examples of good prompting and how we can make our life easier. We hope this two-part series has sparked some new ideas and giving you the confidence to explore these tools in your own work. Again, special thanks to AFP, Northeast Wisconsin Chapter, the Oshkosh Area United Way, and the Nonprofit Leadership Initiative for joining with the Community Foundation to make these sessions possible. And it looks like, oh, you need to connect with the sales team for the discount. Thank you, Noelle. So I will add that into the follow-up notes. So from all of us, at the Community Foundation. Thank you for the work you do every day to strengthen our communities and have a great afternoon.
Thank you, everyone. Thanks for coming.